Am I the only one who didn't like the Odyssey? Or to be more specific, am I the only one who didn't really care about anything happening in the Odyssey? Because this isn't going to be a video that tells you the Odyssey is secretly a really poorly made film. It's not. On a technical level, it's masterful. The visuals are incredible, the costumes have aura, the sound design is great, the score is great, the set pieces are fantastic. But watching the Odyssey, it reminded me of something that is central to the core philosophy behind movies, which is that all of that technical stuff doesn't really matter if the film doesn't make you care for the story and the characters. And the Odyssey does not make you care. Now, maybe I should stop saying you and instead just say I, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to be in the minority on this, but I just feel like I can't be alone on this, right? Like, I know some of you guys must have had a similar experience to me, where I just felt a whole lot of nothing while watching this movie. So the Odyssey is, of course, the story of Odysseus trying to get back to his home in Ithaca, where his wife Penelope and his son Telemachus are still living. And to start off on a more positive note, I will say the scenes with Anne Hathaway and Tom Holland in Ithaca are some of the best stuff in the film. In fact, in general, I will say the stuff that happens in Ithaca in this movie is when the movie is at its strongest. And that's why, towards the beginning of this film, Nolan was giving me hope. Because the movie starts off spending more time on the family dynamic between these three and establishing relationships, and I was getting hopeful. I was like, okay, hold on. Is Nolan gonna make me feel things in this movie? Am I actually gonna care? But unfortunately, all of that runs out pretty quickly. Because for a film that is, at its core, about Matt Damon's Odysseus trying to get back to his family, how many scenes do we actually get establishing those relationships? Like, Matt Damon and Anne Hathaway in this movie have like one scene together prior to him leaving for the war, and basically no scenes between Odysseus and Telemachus to establish their relationship before he goes off to the war. And so, for the relationships that are supposed to be the emotional crux of this entire thing, the movie spends very little time actually getting us to feel those beyond just a very shallow, two-dimensional understanding of, oh yeah, there's a father, and at home is his wife and his kid, so you should care about that. And now, I should say that this is not a new thing for me with Nolan films. I have found that in a lot of his movies, I really struggle to care about his characters and their stories, and it's always been difficult for me to pinpoint why exactly that is. I mean, maybe it's just the way they talk. Like, I feel like with a lot of Christopher Nolan characters, they talk not like real people, but like movie characters. You know what I mean? Like, they talk as if they're clip farming. They talk as if they're trying to drop a really hard quote. It's like in real life. Have you ever been talking to someone who, instead of just talking to you like a normal person, they instead are trying their hardest to sound profound? Yeah, that is how Christopher Nolan characters sound to me. Now, I'm not sure if that satisfies as the entire explanation as to why I can't seem to resonate with his characters and get emotionally invested in their stories, but at the end of the day, that is the unfortunate truth. I find a lot of his characters to feel very distant from the audience. And this creates such a weird experience watching Nolan films, where I'm watching something that I feel like I should love more. Because everything else about this movie is so well put together and so well done, but that core central piece is missing. The best way I can think of to explain this is to think about a movie that came out a couple years ago called The Creator. This was a film that when it came out, everyone commended it for its incredible visuals, its incredible score, which, I mean, obviously was done by Hans Zimmer, but everyone acknowledged that those great visuals and that great score didn't matter much because at the end of the day, the movie didn't make you care about the actual relationship and what was happening on screen. And that is how I feel about so many of Christopher Nolan's movies. Like, because everything else in the movie is done so well, I feel like I should enjoy what I'm watching a whole lot more. It's also what makes 2026 such a good representation of what really matters in movies. Because in the year where we get the Odyssey, done by Christopher Nolan, the biggest blockbuster director of his time, an over $200 million budget where they're out on the ocean, and they're doing things as big as you can possibly imagine. You also have a film this year called Obsession that was made for under $1 million. Small scale, very limited budget by a first-time filmmaker, and I just care so much more about what's happening in Obsession, because at the end of the day, it's about the story and it's about the characters. Now, as per usual, Christopher Nolan employs his non-linear structure here, but unfortunately, I actually don't think this works quite as well as it normally does. Because instead of making the story more engaging and less boring like it does in something like Oppenheimer, I actually think that it kills some of the momentum that this film could have had, where a lot of this movie is told through flashbacks. So we're with Odysseus at a particular point in time, and then we'll jump backwards to show you sort of what he was going through in the past. And I actually feel like this non-linear structure here makes a lot of this story less exhilarating. Because so much of this movie is just us watching things where we already know how they turn out. Like, we're watching Odysseus at one point in time where we know where he ends up, and then the movie is just playing out a bunch of these sequences that are getting him to this point that, once again, we already know he inevitably reaches. And so this structure just kills some of the momentum that this film should have had as this epic journey towards home. And when it comes to those sequences, they mainly take up the middle section of this film, and I do think the middle section is unfortunately the weakest. The beginning of the film, where we're starting off in Ithaca, is definitely stronger, and then once we do get to the third act of this film and Ithaca once again takes center stage, the film does get a lot better. But in that middle section, the film starts to meander a lot as we're just jumping from sequence to sequence, set piece to set piece, without like a real clear through line to really make us care about what was going on. It just felt like we were popping over from, oh, this is the sequence with the Cyclops. Cool. And now we're going to go to the sequence with the Whirlpool. And now we're going to go over to the sequence with the Giants. And don't get me wrong, of course, some of those sequences work really, really well. Like the Trojan Horse sequence of them winning the war was just as incredible as when they screened that scene for us many, many months ago. And admittedly, I do think that is still probably the best scene in the entire film. Although it doesn't really help the viewing experience when the best scene in the movie is something that we've already been shown multiple times months ago. But nevertheless, credit where credit's due, the whole sequence is really well put together. But at the exact same time, I'm not sure that a lot of those sequences really come together to make an exciting whole. Like, it feels like one of those movies where people will revisit certain scenes in isolation on YouTube, because the scene itself is really cool and exciting, but in terms of like an emotional arc across an entire film, I'm not sure it's really there. And then, not to get even more pessimistic here, but I would even argue that some of the sequences are not quite as good as everyone is making them out to be. Like, everyone's been talking about these horror scenes that Nolan is doing in this movie, and there's basically two of them. One of them is like full-on body horror, which was really well done. Now, I can't say that I enjoyed it because it was disgusting and I kind of hated watching it, but like, that's what body horror is supposed to do. But then the other horror sequence that, I guess it's no secret because it's in the trailers, it's the one with the Cyclops, and I don't think it's nearly as scary as everyone has been making it out to be. Now, obviously, you'll have to make up your mind for that when you see the film, but like, the way that everyone was talking about this scene, like, oh my god, it's gonna give you a heart attack, and then you're gonna shit your pants, and then you're gonna change your pants, and then you're gonna shit in those too. I mean, like, not really? And like I mentioned to you guys before, once we do get out of that middle section and we head towards the third act, I do think the film got a little bit better, as some of the emotional beats of the film that were the best parts of this movie come back to take center stage. But by the time it happens, it almost felt a little bit too little too late, because it happens in the last 30 minutes of this movie that is almost 3 hours in length. And so overall, it's not like The Odyssey is a badly made film. It's a movie that will never drop below fine for me, because it is like all Christopher Nolan films. Well put together, has good filmmaking fundamentals, good acting, good visuals, good set pieces. So it's never going to drop into the territory of being like an outright bad movie. But also, I can't put it in the category of being a movie that I actually had a good time with either, because at the end of the day, in order to have a good time with a movie, the most important thing is that it makes you care about the story and the characters. That's why we can watch old movies with bad visual effects, and we can even watch movies with bad acting, bad voice dubbing, bad everything, but we still love them because it gets the story and the characters right. And unfortunately, at least for me personally, The Odyssey failed to do so. But anyways, guys, these are just my thoughts on The Odyssey. Let me know why I'm an idiot down in the comments. Click somewhere on the screen to watch another video. Hopefully, some of you guys will still come back for the next video. Bye-bye.